Got it.
All right. Hey there.
Hello.
Um, hey man, I'm Daniel. This is Vinny, one of my clients. Is just and an awesome dude. And Vinny, I'm just gonna ask you questions about our work together and your journey and any other thing that I'm curious about that pops up.
Hmm.
And if you have anything that comes up during our call, then you're welcome to ask it too. And let's get to it. I look forward to see what comes up.
Yeah,
Um,
let's go.
so Vinny and I have been working by now for what, 4 months, 5 months, something like
Yeah,
that.
about 5 months. Yeah.
And it's been a pleasure working with you and supporting you and seeing you grow and change and showing up to the calls. And I guess the first thing I want to ask is mm, what made you want to do coaching, want to get support by coaching? Like, what made you make that choice?
Probably desperation, frustration, having tried to probably self-coach for years and years, and then, you know, kind of happening on the pathway to happiness and self-mastery kind of courses, and going through those courses multiple times and finding myself kind of moving forward, but also moving in circles. So I kind of going forward, and then I'd find myself back at kind of step one again. And eventually I just kind of said to myself, right, like some external help is needed here, uh, just to try and maybe give me a different perspective and get me pulling in the right direction. So that was kind of it. It was something that I suppose, I mean, traditionally, I would never have asked for help, which is one of the reasons I'm probably here talking to you, because I did try to cope with everything myself, bottle things up, sort it out myself, and don't look for help ever, you know. So, which is one of the reasons I'm here, because obviously that's something I thought was like the right thing to do or whatever. And eventually, it became kind of more and more obvious to me that look, outside help, you need somebody, and that's when I showed up to one of the support calls, and kind of straight away I could see the value in getting help and guidance from other people. And some of it, to be honest, was probably my own arrogance, you know, like the arrogance of my mind, my own arrogance that I got this, I can fix this, uh, it's within me to do it, and you know, like even if you kind of stick with that arrogant theme and you believe you can do it yourself, that doesn't mean it still doesn't make sense to ask somebody else for help. Just to maybe, if you want to frame it or not kind of like hurt your pride or your ego, to kind of accelerate any progress you think you might be capable of making anyway. So it was all those things. But no, I felt I kind of hit like a bit of a brick wall, and that brick wall on the day I decided to join the support call and then take you up on your offer to go into some coaching, was I just felt like I had hit some kind of paralysis, right? So I had you know, my my judge one, my old judge, my judge then with all these new learnings from the self mastery course, and found myself in kind of a state of paralysis where I couldn't almost do anything, and there would be some like punishment of myself for either not being pure and sticking to the practices and the texts or tests or whatever, or just doing my old kind of like pre self mastery course behaviors or whatever. So I suppose the things I was learning were also getting layered on top and on top and on top. And I just felt like I just ground to a halt kind of. And that's why I reached out for help, just to pull me out of that space.
Got it. Got it. Thanks for sharing that and about, kind of the story of, oh, I'll do it myself. I don't need
Hmm.
help. And that's incredibly honest of you to share. And I think something that a lot of us have is like this idea, I'll do it myself, coping mechanism. I'm not gonna ask for help. And
Hmm.
so it's beautiful that you share that and you got past that. And also just seeing like, yeah, it can be here and I can get help to accelerate my process. Like you're still in charge of your process. We meet every week and you do incredible work in between and make the most out of it. Um, I'm curious about a bit more about, you mentioned kind of desperation, and you were really your difficulty kind of with judgment. And here
Hmm.
in the work we do, self mastery work, the work I do with people, we call it the judge, right? The judgmental voice in our
Hmm.
head. And I'm curious if you'd like to share some of what was going on for you at the time that you were struggling with, because I know that so many people struggle with that judgmental voice.
Yeah. Uh, I suppose everything that I've been kind of reading and listening to on the audio side of the course just seemed to make complete sense, which is probably something, it's been a pattern for me, right? I'll get into something, wow, this is it. This makes complete sense. Follow the instructions. This works. I believe in the process, all this kind of stuff. So there was a really, really strong belief there that if I can just kind of follow the lessons outlined in the course and adhere to those kind of practices, and like for example, there's a practice in there which is like finding neutral, which makes a lot of sense, but it's, from where I was coming from, so difficult to do where you're trying to use neutral language, right? You know, something isn't good or bad, it just is, right? No good or bad,
Yeah,
whether whatever emotions, and it makes sense. But
refraining from
uh,
judging our experience.
yeah, and the use of that kind of like binary logic, up, down, good, bad, happy, sad, is so pervasive and so kind of built in to most people, and definitely me. When you're trying to kind of follow a practice like that, it was really difficult. And when you believe in the process and you believe in the practice, it kind of doubles down. Now you're failing at something you believe is the way out of the nightmare. And it just created in me at times uh, just too much pressure, like a lot of pressure to act right, think right, behave right. So it like amped up the critic. Now the critic was always there anyway, but it's just more ammunition. And when you're in a space where you really find it difficult to tell the difference between the critic in terms of identifying with it, and the words it says sound like your words versus maybe other more kind of authentic, like loving parts of yourself. When the difference between those is so blurred, it's just so it was such a kind of a challenging place for me to be, really, at that time. And like as you know, and probably anyone listening to this will know as well, it's not always like that, right? So it's peaks and troughs, and you might find yourself in a moment where that feels like this is the reality. I've gone down, a cul-de-sac, like a dead end. I'm stuck and I need help to kind of lift me out of this, like, which in a way is a good way, because if I hadn't kind of come to that realization, I wouldn't have looked for help. Again, like, out of desperation, it would not have been my first choice. My first choice was to fix it myself, and escape with my pride, and all this stuff. Uh, and just that belief that I can do it, which is weird, it's so strange. On the one hand, you doubt yourself constantly, or I doubt myself constantly, and on the other hand, you've got this just kind of blind self-belief that the you who has been toiling for the last 30 years or whatever, trying to kind of sort out my head, can still do it. Like, next month I'll have it sorted. 6 months time I'll have it done. It's sorted. So the delusion is unbelievable.
Yeah, it sounded like you were struggling with self-judgment, and then you were kind of getting some information or tools about how to free yourself of that. And then that same judge in your mind now judges you about how you use the tools.
Yep.
So it's kind of doubles down on the judgment. Those tools are really good.
Yep.
But now it uses those tools, and I've been there myself. It uses those tools to judge that. A
Yep.
mentor of mine has this remark. He was in this community of people on Facebook, and they're all about kind of positive thinking, positive ideas, stuff like that. But the thing that happened was, that's really an unfortunate, sad story. It's one of the people in that community suicided. He killed himself. And as it was kind of coming about, he was in this group hearing all of these ideas about positive thoughts, and he was struggling with them. there was not a lot of compassion in that. There's just, oh, just think positively, change that
Yeah.
thought. There's not a lot of compassion in that for his struggle, and now he was judging himself for not measuring up to being able to think in that sort of
Yeah.
positive way.
Yeah.
And he ended up killing himself.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, an
Yeah.
extreme example, but something that
Yeah.
happens to us.
It's all too common of an extreme example. It's very common. I don't know about in Israel, but in Ireland, like I presume most of the Western world, suicide is far too common. And without me trying to kind of lead the interview or anything, and I haven't mentioned this to you before, it's not about me now, but like all my life, whatever way my mind works, if I think something is a good idea, if someone says something like that's a good idea, it just gets locked in. You don't have to think about it anymore. It's committed now to your way of operating, and that's it. And I remember silly examples, like small examples, when I went to work first, and my older brother said to me, the foreman or the boss or whatever, they hate these guys that are causing problems. If they say do something and they're constantly coming back looking for, guidance or whatever, that just drives. If you just go do it, you're go. And that was something right. That makes sense now, which is maybe part of the don't look for help. You get an assignment, go do it. Don't cause me problems, go do it. And that was something. But what I was getting at was, it was at the same company I was working with years later. And there was a workshop I was working in, and there was this guy in the workshop, and he was so welcoming. He was so welcoming. He was such a nice guy. He was like the heart and beat of this workshop where we were. He was so friendly. And over about the 2 years I was there, you could just see his kind of mood and behavior just diminish and get so bad. And I remember talking to one of my co-workers, and he said it got to the point where you'd be talking to him and he'd just start crying. He committed suicide. And I
Wow.
remember when I heard that, I said to myself, kind of, right, crying is now not allowed. If you get to the point where you break and weep in front of somebody, that's a red flag and an alarm bell. And that's what my mind would do. It would say, this is a good rule now. Don't allow yourself to get to the point. Now, the emotional hurt or the emotion has happened or whatever, but now in fear of your own life, you're doubling down on what I picked up at that point, which was crying is like the last step towards suicide kind of thing. It's so serious, and which is one of the things that really has blown me away with the work we've been doing. And it's actually kind of the way out, right? To feel those emotions and allow them and kind of make peace with them. But it was that was the way my mind worked. It's probably an extreme way of like picking up life tips, but you just say, right, that's it. That makes sense for all scenarios, past and present, for all people. That's a good rule. I'm going to just commit to that rule now, and you don't even think about it anymore, but it's there, part of your subconscious. So that's why, one of the great fears I had, and even before that, would have been crying, because that to me was evidence that crying is dangerous.
Yeah. And now there's more judgment. I mean,
Yeah.
now we judge ourselves more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for sharing that, man. And I'm curious then, as we're working together over the last few months, what changed for you? Kind of what shifts and changes have you been experiencing?
I mean, the big one would be just the trying to get comfortable with those unpleasant emotions, just fear, sadness, shame, guilt, grief, jealousy, anger, everything. Like all of those that, pushed me into these behaviors where I would try to do everything to avoid situations that looked like something that could trigger some unpleasant emotion. That's been the big thing for me, really. And it's not something I expected as part of our work, because again, if I just kind of go back to the self-mastery course, and there's like maybe 15 or something different practices or chapters to the course, and there's one on emotion. So my mind kind of like skipped over it, like it's less than 10% of the picture or the puzzle. And you can try the emotion stuff, and then you don't worry, you compensate on the the thinking stuff, the right way to think and all this kind of stuff, and figuring things out. And really like I mean, that's what I've learned just hugely, and continue to learn like every single day, is to break that habit of running and hiding and trying to distract myself, or make those bad emotions go away, and instead turn towards them. And that's been like a lot of the course, I suppose, and a lot of what we speak about feels like kind of stuff I've done already, in a way, in that, like, we're talking, I agree with something, you agree with something, it makes sense, it feels good. But the emotion stuff is something that would have been completely foreign to me. And I do feel like it is like that kind of, I had a tooth taken out a couple of years ago. It was really rotten, and it was so rotten that they couldn't do a kind of a normal extraction. It was a surgical extraction, but all it was really in the end was the dentist kind of like was just wiggling the tooth, just wiggling, because if you pulled at the tooth, it would break or whatever. And that's what it feels like really for me for the last several months, with the work I'm doing with you, Daniel, and the work I do myself during the week. It just feels like I'm kind of just wiggling at those negative emotions and getting comfortable with them. And bit by bit, I can feel them loosening. I can feel a loosening just in my body. And like the tooth isn't out yet, but that's been the biggest thing. I didn't expect it. I didn't think that's where we were going. I didn't think that's where the coursework was going. But for me, at the moment anyway, that's the piece that has been by far the most significant, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought so. And okay, why is that so important? Connecting with your emotions, meeting them. Why is that in your eyes so
Well,
important and transformative?
I suppose there's a couple of things, right? Like, so like I definitely see now, and I would have read, like reading, um Mindworks and whatever else, like reading books, and would have read and understood that, okay, thoughts cause emotions, emotions also cause thoughts. It's a bit of a feedback loop. But just the more and more I kind of focus on the emotions and seeing that you can, maybe like resolve a thought in your mind, and that would be using, like, some of the tools in the course, like using a skeptical voice towards that maybe inner critic or whatever, and kind of like just saying, not just blindly believing the voice of the critic, and maybe trying to, use clear language and, make the statements it uses less overwhelming or less dramatic, because it's a very dramatic voice, and just trying to take. So that's all really helpful. But like, if the emotion is there, 30 seconds later, a minute later, an hour later, you can just feel it feeding the same voice again, depending on the emotion you're feeling. So you could be doing, or I could be doing, like a kind of a really, good work journaling or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that feels great. You feel this release or whatever. And then 10 minutes later, you're back in the same process, because I was never going into the emotional side really, and never trying to kind of, allow, accept, deal with, and release that emotion, which if you don't, just will start driving the thoughts again. So that was something that I suppose I did struggle with as well. Like, this, 5 minutes of like relief from whatever story was going on in your head, and then 55 minutes of toil again, till you kind of pull yourself out of it again and say, oh, I'm going to go journal again. And then you do it, and it's this kind of cycle repeats itself. So I was missing one huge part of the puzzle to me, which was the emotion side, and to just drop the mental side and drop the journaling side and drop everything else really, and just go in after the emotions and do, I suppose, which is, so it's like a bungee jump, isn't it? Like, it's safe, but you're essentially throwing yourself off a bridge. It feels so kind of counterintuitive, or to me anyway, is something I would have resisted with like a mortal fear, going in and trying to, you know, reframe my relationship with my emotions and reposition it, and see them as kind of, as much as I can, all the same. The pleasant ones, the unpleasant ones, they're all trying to tell you something. They're all trying to tell a story. They all do want to kind of, move and release, and not get restricted inside in your body. which is something I suppose I always did. Like I always kind of just like pressed it down, you know, made it like that size inside me, but it's like this rock hard kind of dense entity sitting inside you and hasn't been acknowledged. You know, it's like the kind of a, yeah, it's like you've just put your emotion into solitary confinement, but it deserves freedom. You know, then that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And the price we pay is we're numb. We become
yeah,
numb.
yeah,
And I'm curious, in the last few weeks, I'm curious, as you open up to your emotions, how does it impact how happy you are, how loving you
yeah.
feel, or how compassionate you feel?
Well, all I was trying to achieve by doing the emotion release kind of practices and that was really to release, connect with, and alleviate my negative, unpleasant emotions that had been neglected for decades. That's all I was expecting. And I wasn't even looking for the positive ones, you know. But like yesterday now, uh, I was driving in the car on my own, and I was kind of like I had these because of whatever story, these kind of like I have this anxious kind of fearful emotion in me, and I was driving, and I said, right, just just breathe, right. So the kind of words and uh, like the self talk, I just dropped it, right. Just breathe, and that was it. And after about 45 minutes, without me even kind of like looking for any positive emotions, because I was just trying to be with the unpleasant negative emotion, the sad feeling emotion, I just remember a smile came on my face. And from the work I was doing with yourself, like I would have smiled a lot when I was trying to hide or repress an unpleasant emotion. But this was different because I said to myself, wait now, you're there with your unpleasant emotion. There's a smile there. That smile there is there because it just wants to be there. And you've got to allow that too. That's fine as well. The smile, the happiness, it's not there covering something up. It's just there. And I just started smiling, laughing. I mean, I was thinking the oncoming traffic must think this I'm insane or something, you know? It was mad, and which is a lot of like the stuff I'm doing and the way I'm feeling and the kind of places I'm going. 5 years ago, I would have thought he's losing his mind, but I'm actually gaining. I am losing my mind in a good way.
Yeah.
You know, I'm losing my mind. My mind ruled everything, and it was just killing me. And like yesterday, I spent 20 minutes with the biggest smile I've probably had in years for no reason. Like I felt it was almost like, I don't know if you've seen Terminator and he's trying to learn to smile. It was like my face was relearning smiling, you know, and it was kind of almost ecstatic. And that came out of no thought, no situation, no scenario. It wasn't, I was happy because, you know, my favorite team won the match, or there was no thought. It was just there. And that's big for me, you know. That's big, and I see now,
Huge.
like kind of like chillingly looking back, how repressed I was then as well with the positive emotions, because in a way the fear just becomes of emotion, because you're losing control into yourself or into your body and your mind, and loss of control for me was very scary, because it meant it could, you know, I'm smiling now, but in 5 minutes time it could be feeling crap about something. So but no, like, so I never would have realized it, but now I can see like how kind of joyless I became, just because I was just pushing everything down. And the novelty now of allowing emotion and feelings to happen, just even the novelty of it is just astonishing. And it feels like, you know, it does feel like I'm stepping back in time. Like I remember feeling giddy and smiling and laughing like that when I was, you know, 15 for whatever, or 12 for whatever, or 10 or whatever. And I see my kids, I've got young kids, and like it was like that. Like it was just this kind of just joy for the sake of joy, you know. You see them, they open the back door, they run out in the garden smiling and laughing. They haven't done anything yet, you know. Nothing has entertained them yet, but the emotion is just there. And like that's like traveling back in time for me in a great way. So
Ah, that's beautiful. That's so pleasant to hear. Traveling back in time to, you're in an adult body, but the happiness and joy of a child for no reason. We
for
don't
no
need
reason.
any reason.
Yeah,
The mind and its kind of neurosis and the judge are like, no, what are you smiling or
yeah,
putting that aside? I'm gonna
yeah,
be happy for no reason.
yeah, yeah.
Did you imagine 6 months or a year back that this would be possible for you?
No, no, is the short answer. I
Amazing.
was never,
That's beautiful.
I just needed help. I needed guidance. I think, I'm not sure now how people can, I suppose, get the results they want without some guidance.
Yeah.
Or even if you are convinced you will, it does make sense, I think, logically, that it would be accelerated. You will get to that point faster with guidance. So, if people have barriers, which I certainly would have had barriers to reaching out and looking for help, I still probably at that point would have appreciated that if you go and look for guidance and get guidance from the right people, then it will accelerate and help your journey. And I think that just logically makes sense. And it's definitely true for me.
Yeah. I got a lot of guidance in my journey. Huge. Hours upon hours. Probably, I don't know if 1,000 yet, but probably hundreds. Closer to 1,000 than 500 hours of guidance. And it's been huge for me. I know that. Um, I'm curious, this is something we haven't talked about, but I'm curious, I haven't asked you, but I'm curious as you've been connecting with your emotions and feeling happier like a child and this joy. I'm curious if your relationship to your children or your partner changed in any way.
Yeah. I think if you're happier in yourself, just if there's joy in you, it's much easier to be joyful with other people and to love them and to kind of, you know, just be happy to be with them. And I think in a way, that's kind of all people want or need of you in a way, is just kind of allow them to be. And if you're in a kind of joyful state of mind, it's much easier. So in kind of a strange way, if I go back like 5, 10 years or whatever, um, I was probably doing a lot of stuff to make me happy, right? So I was happy a lot of the time, but it was all because I was maybe like working out, like endorphins are high, you feel good, you feel pumped, you come back from the gym, you're happy with the people in the household, and then it goes down like this again, and then you do something else and you're happy, and when you're happy, you're relaxed and joyful and happy with everybody else, right? But then when the endorphins from the gym wear off or whatever else it might be, it could be you just, I don't know, watched a cool movie or climbed a mountain or whatever, something like that, did something good in work. When that wore off, then I could see, like, I suppose the way I related to people, including my wife and kids, would have been like up and down. Someday, and I like, I think we all remember our parents, and you read your parents, oh, dad's cross today, dad's happy today, let's ask for ice cream, right, kind of thing. So it it was like that for me, right? So in a way, I can look back at that time with like slightly rose tinted glasses and say, well, you created happiness there as well at times, right? And you created happiness using the old ways to go out and get it. Uh, then I got into the self mastery work, and I was trying to kind of leave that behind. So like silly stuff, but I stopped working out in that because I just didn't believe, that this is like a road to nowhere, right? All the things that I was doing that like never really brought lasting happiness or lasting joy at all. I just started to believe less in those and move more in towards trying to kind of, um, you know, I guess, deal with my demons by looking internally and reflecting, reflection and all this kind of stuff, and the journaling and doing the coursework. So in a way, for a couple of years, there was probably less joy around, and I was probably more kind of distant and remote with my wife and kids because I was doing this work. Now, I think that's not too bad. That's probably a self-criticism and maybe a slightly harsh kind of reflection on myself, because if my wife and kids are kind of upset and distant or whatever for some reason, it's fine. They're still going to be there. It's not like it's conditional, right? So the love is still unconditional from me to them and from them to me. But I suppose for maybe a year or so was kind of like less joyful around them and more serious and more removed and more kind of going into myself, because I just felt that I had reached the end of the road with the old way. And now in the last few months, and this is kind of really recent for me, the emotional work, first for it to have made sense to me, and second for me to start kind of getting good at really embracing my own emotions and kind of releasing them. So I have felt quite different in the last while with my wife and kids and just people around me in general because of it. So it was definitely one step back, two steps forward for me in the last while. And I'm definitely up. If I'm gambling now, I'm now up, right? I've got more chips now. I'm happier, more relaxed, less stressed. Yeah, with them, I expect less of them. I'm happier for them to just be as they are. Less, and that goes for me as well. So it's like almost, my own treatment of myself is the treatment I'm giving other people now more and more. I feel, I feel better able to kind of help my kids out as they're growing up and going through their own things now than I would have been in the past. Can you still hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Sorry.
I know we're turning off of it, but I hear you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
hear you. It's okay.
So I'm a dad, right? And I definitely thought that's a role. So I have the husband role, dad role, and I had all these roles for myself in different scenarios, which we all do. And whereas before, a lot of times, maybe if I wasn't kind of in a really positive mood or whatever, it was like almost being a dad by numbers, and being a husband by numbers, and trying to remember, well, what I thought made my dad a success at being a dad, or my dad at being a success at being a husband, and trying to kind of apply those things and other things I had learned in an almost at times very robotic way,
All the
just trying to do
standards.
kind of like, just robotic and following following an approach that I felt made sense for me to be a good dad and be a good husband, which is kind of like it doesn't really work, right? Like, so it doesn't particularly feel nice when you're doing it, and you're always trying to, and you're always constantly like measuring your own performance, versus that standard or whatever. And sometimes you exceed the standard, sometimes you fall below it, but it is kind of robotic, whatever. Whereas now I'm feeling more natural about it. And like with the kids, I suppose a lot of what they go through, and everybody is emotional. So I mean, when I became a dad like 10 years ago now, I thought like, shelter, provide them with shelter, provide them with warmth, food, all this kind of stuff, and that's it. So I just wasn't aware emotionally. I didn't know that was something that, as a dad, I was expected to take care of. And I couldn't have anyway. And I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't do that for myself. And more now, I see, I suppose, how important that aspect is. It's not clothing, shelter, warmth. It's not like we're living in the caveman kind of era or whatever, and that's all we need to provide. Actually, the emotional side is absolutely massive, absolutely massive. And I mean, how could I provide an emotional support to people when I'm fundamentally cut off from my own emotions? It's just ridiculous. You just can't do it. So again, I came into this course to help me, but I definitely feel more equipped now to help other people. And I suppose the biggest stakeholders in all this then outside of myself is my kids. And like one of my kids, she is quite emotional. she's got really strong emotional kind of reactions, and probably like me when I was young. And I just feel much more able now to deal with and help her when she's in these kind of emotional situations and recognize what she needs. Okay. So before, I couldn't recognize what she needed in a particular moment. And I would get frustrated. I would get despondent because I didn't know how to fix her or make her better. And then that's me failing as a parent and all this stuff. Whereas now, when I can see what she needs much more so in a given moment. And I'm much happier to give her what she needs as well in that moment. And in a lot of cases, that's just listen, be empathetic, and ask the right questions. And yeah.
That's beautiful, man. Beautiful. Great dad. I bet you're a great dad. I bet you're a great dad.
I try. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. You know, it's kind of like children are really emotional beings. And so, kind of like, if I'm disconnected from my emotions, how can I understand them? I can't.
Oh, I can't.
And
Yeah.
see, as you're connecting to your emotions, like, oh, I get what you need, sweetie. I can
Yeah.
be with you. I'm not freaked out by that. I'm not gonna try and fix you. I'm gonna provide what you need, and I'm gonna love you. And as I'm happy with myself, I can support you better. I
Yeah.
can help you. I can impact you.
Yeah.
So I'm just happy because I know that our work here and the work you're doing is going to have an impact on your children that they won't probably know about, but they'll reap the huge benefits of that. That's such a pleasure for me, and I'm grateful for you sharing that.
Yeah. Me too.
So, kind of wrapping this up, so I'm really grateful for you doing this interview and for how you show up. And it's such a pleasure working with you. Such a pleasure seeing you grow, and you're really a guy that after a session you take everything in and implement that and have our calls make a difference in your life. I'm really grateful to be able to support you in making a difference in your life.
Yeah. 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 And to you, like I mean, it can be a challenge going into the sessions, but it
Yeah,
can, because of all the, like, I'm expecting emotion. I'm expecting to go to places that traditionally I've run away from. But
yeah.
sometimes it's like going to the gym. It can hurt if you push yourself,
Growth
but
is
that's
uncomfortable.
how the growth happens, right? So I
Yeah,
mean, like I'm hugely thankful that I found the course, the community, and then decided to sign up for uh, coaching with you, Daniel. It's been absolutely, it's been a game changer. It's been a game changer. And like, part of me says that with a slight kind of like fear or trepidation. Like, I'm afraid to get too kind of far ahead of myself and say, right, this is great, you're done, we're fixing things, you're all good, and this kind of stuff, because it's been such a long journey, you know. But I do feel like the sessions that I've had with you and the work we've been doing over the last while is something I never would have been able to do myself. I just never would have been able to do myself. I never would have seen what needed to be do or to be done. So like, I'm hugely thankful for the work you were doing with me, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing where else we go with the rest of our sessions together. And I suppose just another thing is, like, I don't know if people who are looking at this, I mean, there is a cost to it, right? But when you stack up the cost, the monetary cost, versus crap you've spent money
well,
on
cut off
before,
for 1 sec. 1 sec. Where there's a cost to it.
yeah, there's a
That's good.
cost to it, right? So a part of your mind says, you you're wasting money. Don't be spending money on this stuff. And but at the same time, like, when you kind of compare it to crap you've spent money on before, just like useless waste of money, crap you spent money on, like, it just pales in comparison in terms of the payoff to your emotional well-being that you can get from doing this type of work. And you're very skilled at what you do, and you deserve to be paid a fair rate for what you do. But
Thank you.
sometimes, like, it's true. You're very skilled at what you do, and sometimes you know, coming into some kind of arrangement like this, your mind might say, you know, it might try and put you off, right? And like part of my mind did. It's the skeptic, right? It's if I've got a very strong skeptic voice like that. Are you wasting your money? That's another thing I've seen this week. You know, this fear that I'll regret doing something or going into something. Huge fear around that. And it was only yesterday I saw this, and it's something I'm going to start like investigating and
You
writing
said
about
that in
now.
other places.
I see it now in loads of places. This kind of huge aversion and terror of regret that you have done something wrong. That's why I've no tattoos, because I was just afraid that I would regret the tattoo. I've always wanted one, but I've been terrified that, like, you know, 2 months later, I'll deeply regret the tattoo and hate myself for it. So that's been a barrier for me as well. And it probably was something like, you know, coming into the course and then eventually looking for help and engaging in this process with you as well was something I probably had to get past as well to an extent. So it's good, you know, it's just more learning, right? And that's something I just kind of saw yesterday, and
Yeah.
it's something I look at. So I thank you for like the places you're taking me and the perspectives you're giving me. And as I said, you're very skilled at what you do, and I certainly couldn't have got to where I am now or done what we're doing on my own.
Thank you so kindly. It's such a pleasure supporting you. And thank you for everything you shared. You know, it's fair point. There's a cost, you know, money wise and time wise and investment wise to doing this work. And your mind may resist that. And then it's a question of, well, what's the impact? You know, when you take kind of the shifts you have and then look at it 5 to 10 years to 20 years ahead in your life, that's just immeasurable, the impact it has on you and your relationships and your kids and your happiness and well-being. It's like that can amount to any amount of money. But thank you for sharing that. Anything else you'd like to share with people listening?
I don't know. That's probably it for me. But I suppose just keep the faith, and I think if you're watching this, you've hit on a winner. You know, it's really powerful. The approach, the results, and it's certainly, you know, been infinitely more effective and lasting, the change, than anything I've done before. And I've tried tons of stuff. Like I'm 42 now. I learned transcendental meditation at 19, and flip-flopped between different practices for years and years and years, and then abandoned practices just due to a lack of hope. And I'm thankful that I found myself into this community and this I don't know, approach that is just fantastic. Like what I've kind of thought about the approach before in the self-mastery course and the work I do with yourself, Daniel, is that like a lot of the self-help spiritual books you read, it's like they're describing the end game or the end goal, and it just sounds amazing, and you believe in it, but I never found a kind of a prescriptive method to get there. In a lot of cases, I remember reading a book from one author, and he just said, you know, enlightenment is beyond, it was beyond, I think, something like time and causality. You can't make it happen, and it's not something that happens over a course of time, you know. And in a way, it was like cool to read it, but in another way, it can be kind of dispiriting. But then there's no point in trying. Whereas now, with these practices, you know, you definitely can make huge inroads into your own kind of emotional, spiritual well-being by trying to engage with the process. So that's my final thought. And look after yourself and each other, just to quote Jerry Springer.
Thank you, Vinny. Thank you so much. Been pleasure working with you. Pleasure having you share. And I love you, man. Thank you so much.
Right back at you. Thanks, Daniel.
Stop recording one.
Namaste.
Thanks everybody for listening.
Adios.